Hello everyone, welcome to another video with me, 320 Simpilot. Today something very exciting, we're taking our first look and flight in the Aerosoft CRJ 550 and 700. Let's take a look. So here we are on the main menu. As you can see, we have our CRJ 550ER and 700ER, both very similar, but the 550 is set up in more of a 3-class configuration, slightly lighter weights on it, I believe, as well. Under liveries for the 550, we've got this sort of private jet style and the United Express. But if we select the 700, we have a few other liveries available to us. United, American Eagle, Air France Hop, Lufthansa CityLine, Delta, a couple of Delta liveries, and Horizon and Alaska. So we'll stick with our, oh no, I've changed it, shouldn't have changed it. We are going to go with our 550 today, and we'll take the Bombardier private livery. Let's get going from Bristol. So a few things I've noticed just from the start. It's quite useful for me. I find these panel states are really good. So you just click on the iPad and it turns on, and then you can select cold and dark. Otherwise, it seems to turn on in a variety of different panel states, and I'm not entirely sure what the one it arrives up in is. Certainly, it wasn't cold and dark, as you could see. Some screens were on. Let us move the yoke out the way. A really nice quality of life feature, getting rid of that like that. And then, yeah, you can click through cold and dark, or we can have turnaround. While we're here at cold and dark, I can click open for the passenger door. I can connect to ground power. Let's open up the doors, all of the doors, and we'll put the chocks in place. There we go. And here we get our first look at the external model. And as you can see, obviously, absolutely lovely. Very, very clean on the outside. I'm not entirely sure how clean it could be in real life. I've never seen an airliner quite this sparkly new, but still, it's a great visual model. It really reflects the light well. And they've got a lot of detail on it. You've got all these hatches and decals, which has been nice to see so far. What you'll notice is on the stairs and things like that, and I used to fly an aircraft that had little air stairs like this, and you can see all the scuffs from the people's feet and so on, which is obviously very true. That's what happens to them. They get quite dirty. So it's nice to have those details. I'd perhaps like to see some livery creators in the future add a bit more of the wear and tear to the outside. Here's a little cargo door underneath the floor on the exterior, which I didn't know existed in the real plane. That's pretty cool. Again, the interior full of scratches and scuffs, as you'd hope. Everything else looking spick and span, shiny new, really nice. You've got some. Well, it all looks spot on, doesn't it, with the proportions? So it's hard not to enjoy the look of this airplane. I think it's a really nice looking aircraft, the CRJ. There's no doubt about it. It's got that sort of business jet feel to it, even though it's sort of an airliner. Something interesting about the CRJ when you fly it, because I have flown, I've spent a fair few hours in a CRJ 200 simulator, which is obviously the older variant of this. It's shorter, but similar in some aspects. The engines being so close together and at the rear of the fuselage like that is quite nice for the pilots. The reason is engine failures on takeoff are one of the more challenging things that pilots train for. In modern airliners, they are often underneath the wings, so these engines would be out here. Well, if an engine fails while you're taking off, that means you have one engine with a lot of thrust at an angle because it's on one side of the aeroplane. And that means you need a lot of rudder and a bit of careful flying to get it in the air. Now the CRJ, because they're close together at the back, you still have to practice this maneuver, of course, in the simulator, but the magic is it's not as far off to the side, so the rudder use isn't as bad, and it would be a bit more manageable. The other great advantage of having engines where they are is that they're almost in line with the centre of gravity vertically as well. In fact, they're slightly above, clearly. So the magic of that is when you apply thrust in this aircraft, instead of it pitching the nose of the airplane up like it would in a 737, it doesn't really have too much of an effect. So there's not too much pitch power couple, which helps for landing and changing thrust in flight. So there's less of a trim change. So yeah, so it's a nice design actually overall to have the engines up at the back there. I really like flying aircraft like this. Yeah, absolutely lovely. Really like this livery. Next, before we can get going, I want to discuss the throttles. I'm using the Thrustmaster TCA, and I know a lot of people have had to work hard to figure out how to get that to work properly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put ready for startup as the panel state. I don't want to sit here and show you a full setup. I'm going to load up the FMS shortly. So you can just click ready for startup, and it does put all the switches in the right place. It might take a second for some things to come online. We can see the APU is starting up. So I think when that started, which we'll see down here, there you go, it's powering up. Now we can do that ourselves, of course. All these buttons work. I'm just sort of cheating. You'll see me struggle through it on a stream soon, I'm sure. But the throttles, you need to make sure they are assigned correctly in the menu. So if you go to options, you can then go to next page and calibrate throttle. You need to go in here. If you're using the Thrustmaster TCA like me, I had to select dual axis and throttle hardware has reverse axes. And then you put your throttles at idle, climb, toga, and max power. Now, obviously, you need to adjust that. Toga is actually my flex gate on my throttles, and max power is my toga gate. And then you can click set on each one, and it has a nice little buffer. Anyway, I didn't have to adjust the buffer. The main point I'm making here is you may find that your throttles aren't showing this raw data input. If that is the case, you go escape, controls, and then you go to your TCA engine 1 and 2, create a new profile for the CRJ, very important, otherwise you'll lose everything that you've worked hard on. Power management, throttle, and make sure you've got throttle 1 axes and throttle 2 axes. Now, I didn't have this before. By default, this throttle had loaded in with a different axes, and I can show you what it is. Let's go to power management, and what by default mine had loaded in as was throttle 1 axis 0 to 100% and throttle 2 axis 0 to 100. So you've got to get the L axis Y to throttle 2 and the L axis X to throttle 1. Very important, or it doesn't work properly. Okay, so as you can see now, APU is down here and online, and it's available up there. The ground power is gone. Otherwise, the aircraft is pretty much ready for us to power up. So I'm going to load in the FMGC or FMS, however you want to call it, today. And they've got a whole set of key commands, which are pretty good. So what we're going to do is we're just going to do a quick flight. Right, so if I go, that's the index page. But if I go to index, pause in it. Now I can put my airport, Echo, Golf, Golf, Delta. I'm just going to steal the airport position to load in there for now. It will update when we take off. And then I can go to, don't remember to go to the next page in this thing. So slightly different setup to what we might be used to. Now, you guys, there's plenty of great tutorials, and I'm sure you've seen them already, especially those of you who've watched the Dudes tutorials. But there we go. There's the pause in it. So flight plan, Echo, Golf, Golf, Delta. So what I'm really looking for today is lateral navigation. I want the lateral. There's not much vertical navigation in this airplane, although there is some provided, and it is pretty good. But what I want to see is how robust the lateral navigation is. Can I do direct and make it work? Anyway, there we go, Gatwick. We'll have an alternate of Heathrow, why not? Actually, no, let's have an alternate of Biggin Hill. More of a private jet sort of alternate. There we go. We're going to depart from runway 27 out of Bristol. And there we go. I can see the little execute prompt, which is a bit hidden, but there we go. You've got to press execute when you do these changes, otherwise it won't work. And then we'll go to the next page, and there's our sort of our route. So we're going to take off from runway 27. I'm going to go to... Right, so we're going to do the Badim departure there, and then I'm going to press execute. You can see our legs appearing over here. And then I can go to flight plan. And we'll go from Badim. And then, quite easy, this is quite nice. We're going to take the Quebec 63 airway, and we'll take that to Kennet. And that's going to pretty much bring us onto our arrival into Gatwick. Obviously, very short flights. And then we need a direct. So I put that in there, and we get direct. And then that's the start of our arrival. So now I can go to departure arrival, index, and this is very familiar from the Boeings. And let's do an RLS for runway 26 left. And we're expecting the arrival of the Bedek 1 Golf, which is there. And then we will take, let's take vectors in between them. Execute. Good stuff. Right, so we've done our flight plan, and now it's time for performance in it. Now, you can enter all this in here. And it all does work like that. We're going to cruise at flight level 150, so just a very short hop today. So for example, I can put 150 in there. Oh, no, you can't do that like that. You've got to put F150. Something I really need to get used to. It doesn't take it just as a 150. Flight 150, execute. But I can also jump over to the iPad. Lots of quality of life stuff here, which is quite nice. So I've got my loading here, so I can set that payload in the actual simulator, then I can copy it to the FMS beneath that, and I'm going to put the init fuel from the airplane. I only need about 3.2 tons to do this, so I'm taking a bit extra. And there you go, you see it's all just copied straight in, and I'm not too worried about the alternate cruise. VNAV setup will climb at 250, 290 in the target. So just a transition altitude here of 6,000 feet worth changing. And anyway, there we go. So there's just a quick setup. There's plenty more to do, but I won't bore you any longer, and we'll get this thing into the air. Of course, one thing we must do is our takeoff performance. So again, we go to performance, and you can see here the numbers are there, and if you change the flaps, it just instantly changes. So flap 8 for a dry runway doesn't seem to account for wind unless it loads it in from the simulator, perhaps. I'm not sure. So I'm just going to click set all, and it does them on the PFD. You can, of course, also go through this very clunky method of selecting which one you want, for example ref, and then turning the knob, and you can see V1 changing, and then you can press select to change V2. Very clunky. I have used an aircraft that had a system like that, and it's not ideal, I would say. We're going to stop at 6,000 feet on this departure. Now it's quite good having an airplane that makes you look on the PFD for what's actually changing instead of looking up at the FCU, because what is here is what the airplane will actually do. When you fly Airbuses and Boeings, you get the numbers written up here as well, but that is just a sort of a gauge. It's no good. What we need to look at is here. This is what the airplane will actually do. Anyway, there we go. So a few other things I can see we need to get sorted out. Again, I'm not sure of all the flows yet, so I can bring up the lights on this overhead panel. What's nice is these systems do work, so let's put the windshield heat to low. That will get rid of that warning. Let's get those doors closed up and ready to go. So aircraft, close, get rid of the chocks, close the baggage doors and the service doors.
Captain, the cabin is secure. All passengers are aboard.
And we can get some more of this lighting up and running. We're on the APU now, so that ground power unit should be gone, which it is, and it's going to be time to get ourselves underway. You'll notice for that setup I had MFD data pressed, which gives you this page on here, so you just press that and we'll get back to the more traditional screens, and you can change the format over here. So there's our LNAV display to check our departure out, right turn, climbing up 6,000 feet out to Badim. Good stuff. I suppose the heading bug could also be set, but I'm just going to center that when we get out onto the runway. More lights down here. I love a bit of integral lighting. Radios, I'm not going to get too bogged down with that for now. Let's get the engine started. So using pushback helper, we're just going to connect to the tug. We do have a nice before start checklist. We have lots of checklists here. So device is off, APU is on, electrics are checked, takeoff data set, doors are closed and locked, beacon is on, fuel pumps are on, hydraulic pumps auto and on, parking brake off. Let me just check the hydraulic pumps. They're actually off, so you can flick them forward auto, on, auto, auto. So some of these will stay on automatically, or some of them want to be in auto and some of them want to be off. So you just have to, take that as you see it. They should just all be forwards by this point. It's a weird system to have it like that, but it does work. They should all be forwards, and that's the normal position. So that makes sense, really. Okay, let's get ourselves underway. I'm sure there's loads of errors here, but we'll see what happens when we push back and get going. We should also get those fuel pumps on. There we go. According to this, fuel pumps and quantity on, and yeah, we got our 4 tons. And there we go, time to take this beast for a flight. I'm really excited about it. It's a lovely day here. I've got real weather on, so yeah, we'll just check the QNH actually, that reminds me, and we'll get ourselves out to a 2-7 takeoff. Right, so pushback stop there. We'll get rid of the tug, and we'll make sure, of course, we've set our parking brake. Let's get the engine started. One of the nicest engine starting systems I've seen here. Now, I don't know if yaw damper will work at this point. Let's engage yaw damper. Yeah, it seems to. Mac trim says they're not, but I think it comes on after the engines are running. There's loads of things here, you know, I'm just not that sure about. But let's get the engine up and running. So they are currently in these shut off D10. I don't know why I get this sort of spinning N2. I'm not sure if this is related to anything else. But anyway, let's start engine number 1. So what I'm going to do is, it's quite simple. We have the APU and the APU bleed on, so all we have to do is press start on the overhead, the start engine, the left engine. We'll get that ITT will reduce and N2 will spin up. And what I'm going to have to do is when that N2 has stabilized or has spooled up a bit, I'm going to, oh no, don't do that. I'm going to be able to bring this out of shut off. This is like the fuel lever cut off. So all looking pretty stable. I do forget the exact figures the dude said to use, but we lift up that lever and then I can put it into the idle gate, and that gives us, there we go, not reverse, that should give us fuel flow, which we can see. We got fuel flow, therefore I'm expecting to see some ignition soon, which means the ITT will increase because this is a temperature otherwise it means the fuel is just being dumped in. There it goes, so the fuel has ignited, which is great news. Whilst that's doing that, what I will do is, somewhere in here, I can put in my flight number. There we go, it would be the Manta 222, typical sort of test flight call sign for me, which then shows up here. I really like the screens, I like the curving of the screens, they really capture that CRT style. And there you go, you get a PA from the cabin crew. I'll also make sure I've set the QNH by pressing B. Oh no, we're not live weather, that would explain that. We are in few clouds, I've done that, I always do that. Right, there we go, that's all stabilised and started, so let's start up number 2. Like I say, one of the easiest start systems, I really like it. So we should get the same again, but you can see N2 is already spinning. I'm not entirely sure why that happens. It seems to be an effect that something I'm doing has generated. But I suppose that means it's spun up, so let's do that and put it into idle. There we go. And then we get an increase fuel flow. You can see right auto ignition up here. Yeah, it's good. It's good. It's got all the systems that you'd expect. Oh, resoak fan off. Let's get the resoak fan on. I feel like that. I think that one should be on. Something I want to point out, if you now were to cheat or whatever and we press ready for taxi, you've got to be careful. Something's reset, so you can see the lights reset, but also importantly my V2 has reset. So, you know, you can start with an aircraft state, but after that it's probably better to keep going with the flows and so on if you can. So I'm just going to reset the speeds in there. You can see I've lost my 6,000 feet altitude as well, so let's wind that down. These are just a few things I'm noticing as I get used to this add-on. There we go. Right, let's get those taxi lights on, which they are. Seatbelt signs are on. Got our route. I think we're pretty much ready to go. Oh yeah, we'll set some flaps, shall we? Let's have flaps going to 8, and my trim for takeoff I can see here 5.8. Again, it's quite handy how they got this system set up. So, oh, not that much. 5.8. Now here comes another thing that you need to set up properly. If you go to your weight and balance and expand it, you need to. Let's see if I can do this enough. You need to move this empty CG all the way to the back, apparently, otherwise it doesn't quite work. So there we go. Right, let's go. Finally. So we'll release. We've got nozzle steering arms down here, very important. That needs to be on. The reason this has a switch here is on bigger aircraft, the switch will be actually on the nose gear, so the ground crew can do it. But in these aircraft, it's so low that it's actually in the cockpit. But if you were to turn this on while you're pushing back and the engine starts, then the hydraulics will get pressurized. In fact, even if you turn on those hydraulic pumps, I suppose, then you could damage the nose gear or the tug. I've got my course bar set to FMS position for the takeoff, and we're going to take off, and we've got a V2 plus 10 takeoff, engage nav mode, speed mode, and off we go. I'll show you that as we get out there. So we've got our after start checklist. Generators are auto, electrics checked, bleed valves auto, packs on, APU on, no, off now, anti-ice is off, and nozzle steering arms, very important. Let's go and taxi. So we set our slats flaps, we'll do a flight control check, trims are checked, thrust reversers armed, flight instruments and brake temperature. So let's go. It's quite simple. We're going to release that parking brake. Down it goes. Quite manoeuvrable on the ground. Let's head off to the right. We're going to take off from runway 27. If you go full pedal like that, it does get a little bit tricky for it to spin round. So there we go. That's quite a lot of thrust for one engine, but if you do a tight turn like that on one engine, it would be. So yeah, it seems pretty reasonable sort of thrust for taxiing on the ground. I think I've got the lights on. They're not particularly bright, just the one little taxi light. We'll do the landing lights when we get out to the runway, obviously. Do a flight control check. Check everything's moving and free. You've got your trimmers visible up there. I think there is a flight control page, a bit like the Airbus down here. But there it is, flight controls. And now I can see my rudder at the back there. Funny how the curve of the CRT screen makes that rudder trim look like it's out of line. And then we can see our roll spoilers and our elevators. So it's all there, which is great stuff. Go back to stats page. I think that's the one. Now it says manual crossflow. My understanding is for takeoff we're going to put that on. I'm not fully aware of the background systems for why, or reasons for why that is the case, but there we go. We've done our flight control check. Thrust reversers, you need to arm them. Very strange, I've never seen that before, but you have to actually engage these switches, otherwise you won't get thrust reverser in case you reject for the takeoff. I haven't seen much about the spoilers, so I'm assuming that they're pretty much automatic. We've done slaps, flight controls, trims, thruster versus flights, and brake temperature down here. Yeah, again, big fan of these screens. They look really nice, really CRT style. Right, before takeoff, lights and strobes will come on. Fuel crossflow, yeah, we'll go to manual. Flight attendant advised, transponder on, radar terrain, gas. Okay, so we are pretty much ready to go. Right, I'm excited. I can't wait to give this a go. So here's runway 27, not quite full length, but that'll be more than enough for us today. Get all those lights on, get those strobe lights on. Around we come. So, as I said earlier, we're going to take off, check it's clear on approach, we're going to apply a bit of thrust, let the engine spool up, then we're going to go. We're going to put it through to toga thrust for today. We're not using a flex power for this one. And we are going to then engage the toga switch, which will update the FMS to our position. Once we've done that, we'll get ourselves into the air at rotate, which is going to be 125 today. And then we are going to head up to 6,000 feet. On the way, I'm going to engage speed and nav mode. We have speed mode, not a VNAV mode in this autopilot. Okay. Think we are ready to go, so let's bring it round onto the runway. Here comes the thrust. Then I'm going to press that. We get takeoff. 2 clicks forward and it goes toga. This little thing here is just a reminder. I don't think the real aircraft has that because you could feel the detent. But there we go. Right, a bit of forward pressure on that stick as well. Off we go. I can't remember if it was 80 knots or 100 knots for the stick to neutral. But there we go. Quite a nose down attitude initially on takeoff in the CRJ. So there's our V1 rotate. So up we go. Keep pulling to get it in the air. Otherwise it just sticks to the ground like that. And positive climb. Get that gear up. And I have to really pitch up. The flight director seems to lag behind. So you can see that slow rotation has meant I'm already doing sort of 160 knots. So let's get... speed mode, nav mode engaged. We're through 600 feet, so I think that means the autopilot is usable. And I'm going to bring the speed back to about where it should have been. It's in the 140s, wasn't it? But anyway, we're way up through our acceleration altitude now. So thrust can come back to climb thrust, as you can see there, and the nose should lower. Let's wind up the speed to our en route speeds. At this point, it's going to be about, we can just do 250. I'm going to do 230 knots because we're zooming around that turn. So there we go. In a second, if I zoom in on that nav display, you'll see that we're coming up to our first turn on that departure. Let's get those flaps in. It does display the flap limiting speed on here. The Bombardier aircraft I flew did not, which was always a tricky one. You could bust the flaps without being able to see it on the PFD. You had to remember what the speeds were. Flaps to 0. And now I'm just going to do the first level off. I think this will be useful to see today because... this airplane has no auto thrust, so I must keep an eye on that speed. So it goes out capture. So as soon as it's flashing out capture at me, that's a big deal because it means it's lowering the nose. It's no longer climbing at that speed, and you can see the speed immediately washing off. So let's bring the thrust back. And you can see manual thrust up here. It's still capturing. It should level at 6, so in 500 feet, and I've got to just balance that thrust. Okay, so let's now say air traffic control give us a direct, and they give us direct to Kennet. So I select it there, and I press execute, and hopefully it will draw its line. I'm going to press this heading bug. I'm not a fan of systems with heading bugs you have to adjust, but that's just me being a lazy Airbus pilot. But there we go. I think we're going to Kennet now. So I'm going to wind that altitude up. We're going to do flight level 120 today. So there is 120. I'm going to press speed. I'm going to add thrust and it should go up. So there's climb thrust, and now I'm just going to wind that speed up to 250 and hopefully it won't decelerate. Now I need to set, let's get rid of that yoke. Now I need to set standard on here, which happens to be the same today. It's already flashing out capture, although I know it can't possibly have captured yet, but there we go. So we're now level. I've set my speed bug to 280. The plane I flew that didn't have auto thrust, it was a turboprop, but it didn't include a speed bug unless you were using the speed mode. So you didn't have to worry about it. You just sort of flew the speed you wanted to. So it was a strange experience trying to explain. You had to constantly keep in mind what your target speed actually was. But let's set up some of the landing parts. So if we go to the overheads, I need to set my landing elevation, which is this dial up here. The Airbus takes this automatically. I can see it set to 0. Gatwick is a little bit higher than that, so let's just let's top it up a little bit. Probably should have done that before we got going. There we go. And what else do we need to do? We have to set up the bugs for the approach. So I can go to performance and I can do set all. Now I think they set in the background, but I'm not entirely sure on that. Again, the plane I flew, you would see it, so I'm not sure how to make it see this, because I press select for the ref speed of the target. No, don't know. Something to figure out in the future. But when we're on approach, I'm going to press set 132 and it will automatically set this magenta bug to 132. I'm going to try and fly about 137, I suppose, a little bit faster than that. Not sure why that's flashing. We are on standard. There we go. Good stuff. Right, a bit of a tailwind, so should be nice conditions for our landing into Gatwick. The radar is off, but I think I can turn it on, no problem, if I go down here and set it to weather. And then we see weather. But I don't know how much functionality we have yet with the radar. Radars are quite rare to see. Yeah, the tilt. There we go. Let's see if I can tilt it down. It's tilt -9. Yeah, not showing much. Alternatively, I can press terrain, but I haven't seen much of a terrain map appear. We got some different. Oh, watch that speed. Got some different formats over here on the navigation display, so you can flick through. We've got a sort of a more plan view, a sort of rose style view, more compassy style, but I'm going to keep with this one. We can also go to MFD menu and choose a window. So if we have the window on, it gives us sort of our next waypoint and time. So we're going to be at Kennet in 20 miles. Whilst we're in this menu, I can select things like high naves. I can remove the airports. This is how you can fiddle. So this is the MFD menu, and there are actually 2 pages here as well. We can fiddle around, display the alternate flight plan, and so on. Right. A little bit of performance to set up, I think. If I go to Perth, down VNav, it should have even a top of descent. But let's go to VNav setup. That's the climb, cruise, descent. Transition level is not 180. It'll be something like, oh no, remember the F. Flight level 70. There we go. And execute. One thing I'm noticing is I'm using my Thrustmaster TCA with the climb detent here and the idle detent here, but it's very sensitive, and with so much time flying with manual thrust, I may have to rethink that plan, because as you can see, it's can be a bit of a challenge to hold the speed. You've got to constantly to work on it, obviously, but it should just be nice to have a little more fine control. So I may fiddle with my control sets up a bit in the future. So let's give it a good test of the lateral navigation. I'm going to change the runway. Let's pretend now we're we're being given a different runway. We're now going to arrive onto the ILS 08 right. Let's say the winds have changed. So I'm going to select ILS 08 right. And there we go, in via Bedek again. So I can just press execute, and it does that, which is pretty good. And then I'm going to do a direct into one of those later waypoints on the arrivals. Let's go to the 8.6 waypoint as if we're getting a direct in. So this is, something that lateral navigation has been a bit of a struggle sometimes in Flight Simulator. But let's now say we're going down to our platform altitude. Let's go down to, let's try 3,000 feet. Then I'm going to go to speed, thrust levers to idle, and down we go. We're going to set the QNH, which is already set on 1013 and matches. You see we get that range ring. It does also show our top of descent, which we've just passed, and it will give us, I believe, a target vertical speed if you set it up right, although perhaps I haven't today. So down we go. We've set up our speeds for the arrival. Going to have a bit of a tailwind on approach, 4 knots, but that's no big deal. Most modern airliners are capable of landing with that sort of tailwind quite happily. And I think that should all be set up. So we've done our departure arrival. As I say, I know the VNav does work if you set it up right, but I seem to have managed to... Oh, I've done something wrong, I'm sure, here. There's our FPA. So, yeah, it is aware, and you would get a little vertical deviation scale, which I have seen before. So at the moment, it wants us to be 3,000 feet at India Golf Golf 86, so we're going down to 3,000 feet. What I want to do now is just make sure I've tuned the ILS correctly. So the ILS for Gatwick 08 right, frequency 1109, so I can go to, I believe, radio page and tune it in here. It's in auto, but it would be 1109, and put that in, and I'll put it in the other side as well. 1109. If we look down here, 1109 is tuned on my side, and on COM2 1109. Course is going to be 078, which I'll set later on as we get there. I'm just going to update that heading bug. Not sure why it's flashing out capture, we're not quite there yet. It is diving down faster, or with more ease than I had imagined. We're about, what are we, 30 miles out. We need 6, 12, 18 miles from here. 6 times 3 is 18. So yeah, not sure why. I think you can use vertical speed actually is the more common descent mode. And you can see that I can wind it up and down like that. And it shows me vertical speed 1.3 with a down arrow, so that's pretty handy. So let's do that. Let's select a speed of 250 knots now. And it's nice, we can see our level off. So I want to be level at 3,000 feet at that point. So, oh no, don't do that. No, that was a mistake. The scroll wheel works on the landing gear. Something to remember for the future, certainly. Right, so let us wind that vertical speed until that sort of magenta line sits on the 3000s. Makes life really easy for us. Coming within our level off now. You can see it's got a bit of a vertical deviation scale here as well. We should see the ILS come up. You can do this progress page too, is quite handy. It gives you your exact tailwind and crosswind now. So airplanes will have quite specific limits, and even pilots may have different limits. So it's handy to be able to just glance down here and get a picture of your tailwind and crosswind. Although we wouldn't use this typically. It's a bit of an awareness thing. You'll go with the wind that air traffic give you, because the wind on the ground could be different to the wind where you are, of course. You can have your nav source. It seems if I set it to FMS, I still get the localizer sort of overriding it. Well, in fact, it's time to come back on that speed. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it to localizer, and then I can spin the course bar, and that way I can see my DME. There's probably a better way of seeing your DME. Right, let's get the speed back. We are 12 miles out, doing 230 knots. It's a bit fast. I'm just going to set. If I go to performance, I'm going to say set, so it's going to target 132, but it's not targeting it, it's just going to set it for me. Still got that tailwind, so we'll get the thrust back. Quite high speed limits for the first few stages of flap, 230 knots, so the same as the first speed limit on the 320. So we go to flaps 1. See now that glide slope coming in, and the localizer is coming in to meet us as well. Or the localizer isn't, sorry, but the glide slope is now here. It's gone into roll mode, so I'm going to, if I select heading, and then I'm going to arm approach. There we go, lock and glide slope of arms. We'll go to flaps 2, or it's not 2, I think it's 8 degrees, and we'll do 180 knots from here. So getting that thrust back on. I'm hoping any second to see it head off to the left. There we go, so it's sequence. There's lock and glide slope. It's turning, so this is a big challenge to see how it handles this. I know there are some bugs in Microsoft Flight Simulator and ILSs at the moment. Idle the thrust levers. We're 9 miles out, 190 knots. Don't want to be any faster. Let's put the gear down. Down it comes. Let's make sure those thrust reversers are armed. Probably should have done that earlier as well. Yeah, and it's diving down at 2,700 feet per minute. Let's disengage the autopilot. And yeah, as I said, there's a couple of bugs I think in Flight Simulator causing this glide slope issue. So I'm just going to fly that myself for a second until we get back. So let's go level flight, add a bit of power. Gear is now down, flaps are at 8. Let's go to the next stage of flap. Okay, there's the glide slope again. So what I'm going to do is just go heading out, and then I'm going to arm approach again and see if it looks better. That looks a bit more sensible, and now we're going to re-engage that autopilot. There we go. Hopefully it'll get that nose up. Not sure what I'm doing wrong here. Let's just fly manually then. We can follow those flight directors. Fully configure, get the thrust on. Oh, be careful here. Very sensitive on the pitch, but we don't want to get slow. Okay. Get it trimmed out. I have made it fly an RNS normally. Quite a no-lows attitude on approach in this airplane, but it does have that sort of pointy nose-down sort of picture to it, so I can see why. Right, so things are coming together. I don't know if the autopilot will work if I engage it now. About 140 knots. Let's just give it a go. So get rid of that disconnect bar and press autopilot. Hopefully it does say lock out, but it hasn't got glide slope mode. I see glide slope's not seeming to show up properly in the window. Even though I think it is actually following that glide slope now. So that could be a bit of an FMA issue. After all, our target altitude is 3,000 feet, which we know it isn't flying. So it's doing quite a nice job now. And like I say, I have managed to get it to do an RNS before. But anyway, let's go and give it a landing. So landing checklist is here. We've done the flight attendant, passenger signs are on, thrust reversers armed, gear down, flaps are set for landing. We're going with flaps 45. I've got the thrust stabilised, quite a bit of thrust, 64%. This seems to be working out to keep us out of the app. You can see that crosswind kicking in. Quite a lot of flap out there, so that probably explains it. Thrust can come back a little bit. 2 whites, 2 reds out there. So let's give it a go. Just going to thrust back a little bit. As I said, autopilot off, and with the autopilot off, it's not... Oh, I see. When you press it twice, it actually re-engages. I need to remember that for my autopilot button. Yeah, a bit of a breezy day today, it seems. That tailwind getting affected by the hills behind us. Don't want to get slow. Adding that thrust back on. Adding the thrust back on. Yeah, really likes a lot of... Oh, yeah, I can see I haven't got enough power on there. It likes a lot of power on final approach. Those pappies aren't quite lined up properly in my scenery at the moment. So I'm not too concerned about those. Aiming towards the middle of that touchdown zone by this point. Over the threshold. No pitch power couple. Idling that thrust. Now, it's a low aeroplane, so... There we go. Get those reversers out. And manually braking. I couldn't find any auto brakes if there is any. Get the nose wheel down. It's quite a nice aeroplane to land. I've done a couple, and yeah, it's really quite benign in the landing, because when you take the thrust off, the nose doesn't try and drop. And let's squeeze on those brakes there. The reversers to idle. And there we go. So you can see reverse. There we go. Yeah, I think that's all worked out. Is it showing on the outside? Yeah, there they are. So I have got my reversers tuned. So we've done it. Our first flight in the CRJ. So this is just very much a first look, sort of first impressions. I'm going to spend more time with it, and we'll see how things update. We'll certainly be streaming it on the channel soon, but I just wanted to give you guys a bit of a view of it for those of you on the channel who are thinking of picking it up. So there are definitely some things in it that are waiting to be worked on. I know some things are hopefully going to get sorted out, but yeah, it's what's really nice for me is that lateral navigation works pretty much straight out of the box. You tell it to go direct somewhere, it goes direct. We're off the runway now, so bringing those flaps up, and I suppose I probably want to start up the APU. So I'm going to press power, I think, and it shows up there, and then I'm going to press start to make it start light. So that all works. So yeah, so this airplane has, you know, we've seen a few different interesting bugs, but I'm not sure what is caused by me. So yeah, probably quite a lot. It's a very complicated airplane. It's very different to what you'd expect from some other airliners. It doesn't function, and this is true of the other, like I say, the other aircraft I flew that wasn't a Boeing or an Airbus. It's got its own sort of methodology that makes sense when you're used to it, but it's going to be a bit of a transition, I think, for some of us who are used to flying, like I say, the Airbus or Boeing style, which are actually more similar than people think. This is really quite different. A lot of the switches, the layouts of the overhead panels, you know, it's got a different methodology. But we got there, and we flew our approach. I've got to work out a lot more about this EFIS setup and how that's supposed to be used. Again, this is not a tutorial, this is just to take a look. There's our APU online. But as you can see, lots of systems working. Brake temperature coming online. This sort of warning panel up here all works, which is really good. I can't find it, you know, well, pretty much every switch I press, something changes up here. Here you go, you can see the hydraulic system. So it does have all the systems built into it. And as far as I can see, it's got enough systems for anyone to be happy with that. So yeah, you can fiddle with a lot of different things. You can get lost into this FMS if you want and find out all sorts of things. I need to try out holding as well. Lots of things for me to try out. Let's see, that APU's online. Let's just shut it down here and see what happens. So I think I need to turn the strobes off. There we go. And we can bring these thrust levers into cut-off. Oh, a bit hard to do now. Better do that one first, then that one. There we go. And down they go. And hopefully that APU generator takes the power. Yeah, it does. And there we go. I'm sure Gatwick wouldn't appreciate us just shutting down here. It's got lots of different noises. I know even the Ram air turbine works. I've had that deploy while I was testing it. So that comes out and makes noises. It's got the noises that... I don't know if you can hear that. As you move around, they are sort of spatially placed, a bit like on the A321X. So when you're in the right part of the airplane outside, you'll hear the right sound effects. Got the APU at the back there. So that's been quite nice to see. A really nice visual model. I'm looking forward to some custom liveries with, like I say, a bit of wear, a bit of grime on them, because this is the most clean jet I've ever seen. But I suppose a private jet like this, you probably have it pretty spick and span if someone was paying to own one of these. So that's all for today's video. I hope it's been interesting for you, especially those of you looking at Microsoft Flight Simulator and this new CRJ by Aerosoft. Aerosoft were kind enough to send over this press copy, so we'll be doing a review at some point in the future. We'll also use it on some live streams and see how it compares and what we can do with it. I just want to make sure I have a bit of a better understanding of the systems before we take it live. It's a different machine, and it deserves to be treated as one. And we'll talk about some of the extra details you get in this style of this aircraft, this style of regional airliner. But yeah, so there's our first flight. I hope you enjoyed it. There'll be more videos on the CRJ, but also, of course, the Airbus coming to the channel soon. Plenty of tutorials and live streams, so do please subscribe if you'd like to see that. Otherwise, do keep safe and well. We'll see you again in another video soon. Bye-bye.